The Daxamite engineer's jaw hung open, eyes bulging in shock as he beheld the human warship, a colossus that dwarfed his own vessel and bristled with enough weaponry to obliterate a small moon. It was the year 2257, and Charles Allen, a grizzled human starship engineer, strode through the orbital shipyard above Earth, having just been summoned to the office of Admiral Johnson. Humanity had been cautiously exploring and colonizing nearby star systems for decades, always wondering when they would make first contact. That day had finally arrived. A Daxamite ship now hung in Earth's orbit, requesting repairs. The Admiral tasked Charles with acting as liaison to the Daxamite engineer Arlet. Getting this right could mean the start of an alliance with the advanced reptilian species, but getting it wrong could spell disaster. If the fiercely competitive Daxamites saw humans as weak, they would not hesitate to conquer and enslave them. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. As Charles walked towards the alien ship, a knot of tension twisted in his gut. He knew the importance of this meeting, and he knew he must not fail. Charles approached the docking bay, nerves on edge as the Daxamite ship slid through the atmospheric containment field. The vessel was sleek, all sharp angles and glinting metal. The airlock hissed open, and out stepped Arlet. The Daxamite towered over Charles, rippling muscles visible beneath his form-fitting silver envirosuit. Piercing yellow eyes locked onto Charles as Arlet gave a curt nod in greeting. "Engineer Charles Allen, I presume." Arlet's voice was a low rumble. "I am Arlet, chief engineer of the Daxamite ship Exareth." Charles extended a hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Arlet. Welcome to Earth Station Alpha. I'm here to assist with your repairs." Arlet ignored the proffered hand, instead turning on his heel and striding towards the damaged section of his ship. Charles hurried to keep up with the Daxamite's long strides. As they walked, Arlet spoke, his tone dripping with arrogance. "I doubt there will be much you can do to assist. Daxamite engineering is the most advanced in the known galaxy. Our ships are faster, stronger, and better in every way than anything your primitive species could produce." Charles bit his tongue, fighting back the urge to retort. Instead, he replied diplomatically, "I'm sure your technology is impressive, but humanity has made great strides in recent years. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Arlet let out a derisive snort. "I highly doubt that." They reached the damaged area. A gaping hole blasted in the hull plating. Twisted metal and frayed wiring were visible within. Charles pulled out his scanner and began to assess the damage. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice that the Daxamite technology, while advanced, was not quite as cutting-edge as Arlet had boasted. In fact, he recognized several engineering solutions that were nearly identical to ones humanity had developed years ago. Charles glanced at Arlet, who was frowning at a flickering holographic display. It seemed the prideful Daxamite was starting to realize the tech. Part of Charles wanted to point out that humanity had already solved the very issues Arlet was grappling with, but he held his tongue. Bruising the alien's ego would not help the situation. Then instead, Charles focused on the task at hand, calling up schematics on his wrist display. "Display. Looks like you've got a ruptured power conduit here. We'll need to bypass it and reroute power through the secondary systems." Arlet growled in frustration as his display glitched out again. Yes, I see that. Let's get on with it." As they worked, Charles couldn't help but notice Arlet's mounting irritation. It was clear the Daxamite was not used to dealing with tech malfunctions, nor with having to accept help from a lesser species, but Charles remained professional, keeping any thoughts on the matter to himself. There was too much at stake to risk offending Arlet or the Daxamites as a whole. Charles knew that. So he simply put his head down and focused on the repair job, all while hiding a small secret smile. Perhaps humanity was not quite so primitive after all. The days passed quickly as Charles and Arlet labored over the Daxamite ship, repairing system after system. At first, Arlet maintained his haughty demeanor, insisting that he didn't need Charles' help. But as they worked together, solving complex engineering problems, a grudging respect began to grow between them. One evening, They sat in the shipyard break room, sipping coffee and discussing the finer points of warp drive calibration. Charles was just about to make a point about the importance of proper phase alignment when a shrill alarm pierced the air. Red lights flashed on every wall as a robotic voice announced, "Alert, unknown vessel approaching Earth. All personnel to battle stations." Charles leaped to his feet, coffee forgotten, and raced to the nearest monitor. His heart pounded as he scanned the readouts. There, just beyond the orbit of Mars, was a massive ship. It dwarfed anything Charles had ever seen, easily 10 times the size of the largest human vessels, and it was heading straight for Earth at full speed. The comm crackled, and Admiral Johnson's tense voice filled the room. "Alan, we've got a situation. That ship out there isn't responding to any hails, and our scans show it's armed to the teeth. I need you to lock down that Daxamite ship and get to the observation deck pronto. We may be in for a fight." "Understood, Admiral," Charles replied, his mouth suddenly dry. He turned to Arlett, who had risen to his feet, yellow eyes narrowed. "You heard the man," Charles said. "We need to secure your ship and get topside. Looks like we got company, and not the friendly kind." Arlett hissed softly. "Your admiral seems to think your ships stand a chance against that behemoth. I find that hard to believe." Charles just shook his head as they jogged towards the observation deck. "Don't underestimate us, Arlett. Humanity has a few tricks up our sleeve." But even as he said it, Charles felt a knot of fear in his stomach. He had faith in human ingenuity and grit, but that alien ship, it was beyond anything he'd ever imagined. They burst onto the observation deck, and Charles gasped. The viewport was filled with the sight of the human fleet, dozens of sleek, powerful ships, all turning to face the oncoming threat. And there, at the center of the formation, was the pride of the human navy, the HMS Titan. She was a beast of a ship, bristling with weapons turrets, and sheathed in the shimmering glow of the most advanced shielding humanity had ever developed. Her engines flared blue-white as she surged forward, ready to meet the enemy head-on. Charles heard Arlich's sharp intake of breath beside him. The Daxamite's eyes were wide, his scales flickering with a mix of emotions that Charles couldn't quite read. Shock, certainly, disbelief, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of fear. "Impossible," Arlett muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. How could humans have built such a ship? Charles didn't answer. He just watched, heart in his throat, as the Titan led the charge towards the unknown, towards a battle that would decide the fate of his world, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself. Charles turned to Arlett as the human fleet surged forward. That ship leading the charge, the HMS Titan, she's the pinnacle of human military engineering. Everything about her, the weapons, the shields, the engines, it's all built on decades of research and hard-won experience. We've poured our blood, sweat, and tears into making her the best damned ship in the galaxy. Arlett cocked his head, yellow eyes assessing the Titan with newfound interest. Impressive. I had not realized humans had advanced so far in such a short time. Charles allowed himself a small, proud smile. We're full of surprises. Suddenly, the unknown vessel opened fire, lances of searing energy cutting through the void of space. The human fleet scattered, but the Titan held her ground, her shields flaring to life as she absorbed the brunt of the attack. Charles gripped the railing, his heart pounding. The deck shuddered beneath his feet as the Titan's guns roared to life, returning fire with a vengeance. He watched in awe as the ship's powerful weapons sliced through the enemy's defenses like a hot knife through butter. The rest of the fleet rallied around their flagship, their own weapons adding to the onslaught. The unknown vessel reeled under the coordinated attack, its shields flickering and failing. Arlett let out a low hiss of amazement. Such power and coordination. I had not fought humans capable of such feats. Charles glanced at him, eyebrow raised. We're a resilient bunch. We adapt, we innovate, we overcome. It's what we do. As the battle raged on, the enemy ship began to falter, its weapons fire growing erratic. Under the relentless assault of the human fleet, it finally turned tail and fled, limping away into the depths of space. Cheers erupted across the observation deck as the humans celebrated their victory. Charles felt a swell of pride in his chest, a fierce joy at seeing his people triumph against the odds. Arlott was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "I was wrong about your species, Charles Allen. There is much my people could learn from yours, your technology, your tactics, your sheer determination. It is truly remarkable." Charles clapped the Dachshundite on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie. "We've both got a lot to learn from each other, Arlott. This is just the beginning." As they watched the victorious fleet return, Charles couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. Humanity had just taken its first step onto a much larger stage, and with allies like the Daxamites at their side, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The battle was over, but the adventure was just beginning, and Charles was ready for whatever the galaxy had in store. The Titan shook under another barrage of enemy fire, her shields flaring as they struggled to repel the onslaught. Inside the engineering deck, Charles worked feverishly at a console, his fingers flying over the controls as he tried to keep the ship's critical systems from failing. Hallett stood nearby, his eyes darting between the readouts on the screen and the human engineer's determined face. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. Charles didn't look up from his work. "I'm trying to reroute power from the auxiliary systems to the shields. It's a long shot, but it might just give us the edge we need." Arlott frowned. "That's a dangerous move. If it doesn't work, you could overload the entire power grid." Charles nodded grimly. "I know, but we don't have a choice. If we don't do something now, the Titan is done for." He tapped a final command into the console and held his breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights flickered, and the ship's engines surged with new power. On the view screen, the Titan's shields glowed brighter, absorbing the enemy's fire with renewed strength. Arlott let out a hiss of amazement. "It worked. I can't believe it." Charles allowed himself a small, tired smile. "Never underestimate human ingenuity, my friend." But even as he spoke, a warning klaxon blared through the deck. Charles' eyes widened as he saw the readouts on his screen. No, the power surge. It's overloading the main reactor. We've got to shut it down." He leaped from his seat, racing towards the reactor room, with Arlott close on his heels. They burst through the doors just as a blinding white light filled the chamber. Charles threw himself at the emergency shutdown lever, yanking it down with all his strength. The reactor groaned and shuddered, the light dimming as the overload was contained. But then, with a deafening roar, an explosion ripped through the room. Charles felt a searing pain in his side as he was thrown against a bulkhead, his vision going black. Arlott, shielded from the worst of the blast by his envirosuit, staggered to his feet. He saw Charles lying motionless on the deck, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. The Daxamite hesitated for only a second before scooping up the injured human and carrying him out of the reactor room. In the aftermath of the battle, as the Titan limped back to Earth for repairs, Arlott sat by Charles' bedside in the medbay. The human was in a coma, his fate uncertain, but Arlott knew one thing for sure. Charles Allen was a hero, and his actions had saved not only the Titan, but perhaps the entire human race. As he prepared to return to his own people, Arlott made a vow. He would tell the story of Charles Allen and the incredible bravery and ingenuity of humanity. He would work tirelessly to build bridges of cooperation and friendship between their two species, for he knew now that together, humans and Daxamites could achieve wonders beyond imagining. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead would be long. But with allies like Charles Allen and the indomitable spirit of humanity, anything was possible. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.